Okay, so now let's go ahead and move to something else. Let's look at working on setups. Cool. So suspension is one of them for sure. There are very angry squiggly lines here. And that is going to bring us to some very important bits of information. We have suspension velocities that are not being displayed. Why are they not being displayed? Because this is the default workbook from Motec, and it's looking for something called the damper velocity front left, and that's what it was typed into it, so that's what it's looking for, but that unfortunately doesn't exist. So you have to add channel because it's called something else. The mu is exporting damper position. What are we looking for? Damper velocity. Okay. Okay, so I know why. In any case, there's bad data here, and that's why it's not being displayed. It says not available. Histograms are not being displayed. How to fix those? Okay, well, that leads me to a perfect segue to maths. Maths are very important. Maths are the entire reason why Motec is useful. Otherwise, you need to go to iSpeed or something else that's a little bit more user-friendly. The entire point of iRacing, of Motec, besides the fact that you can manipulate the graphs and make them look however you want and change the colors and change the fonts and everything, the whole point of it is here. So you go to the global maths, you have user-defined maths, you have the Motec ones, temporary ones, user, damper velocity, why? Oh, okay. So the damper velocity itself is a channel. I don't know who's making it. I don't know if it's Motec or not. But this is a particular case that's actually special. I guess Motec already knows that normally you're going to have a damper velocity, and there's no such thing as a damper velocity sensor. The cars are fitted with damper position sensors, and the damper velocity is a derivative of the damper position, so that tells you what the speed is. So this is a special case. This is the only one that will have something like this, where you can go to edit maths. If you go to something else and you right click on it, it won't have edit maths, it'll be blank. But this is a math that already comes in by default. And what you can see here, it says auto select, manual select. You have to go to manual select, and the problem is that this damper position front left doesn't exist. So you have to go to damper position front left properties. Shouldn't exist. I think it's called suspension position. So in any case, what we're looking for is that it's calling for something that's not there, and this is there. It's suspension position. That's the problem. Motec is calling it damper position, but iRacing and the mu is exporting something different. So let's go ahead and replace those to suspension position. This is the front right, suspension position rear left, suspension position rear right. Boom. Bam! There it is. You have your suspension velocities, and now the histogram works. Fixed. The FFT, that stands for Fast Fourier Transform. Cool. We have to do a little bit more work though, because this stuff looks ugly. The problem is that these lines are very, very jittery. So we have to do a little bit of filtering just to help us look at it and take out some of the noise. So let's go to the maths. We're going to go to users, and it's completely blank, and we're going to make a new expression. So we're going to say add expression. We're going to give it a name. Let's call suspension position front left filtered. So this is how you make a math. It's pretty cool. I guess I'll walk you through it. This is where you type in the name. This is quantities. It means Basically, it gives you an option of what are we measuring here. Well, for suspension position, what are we measuring? We're measuring the distance. So we're going to look for something like that. What do we have here? What kind of options? Length and distance. I wish I knew what that said. Okay, so we have length and distance, and the display units, we're going to go to millimeter, and the resulting unit is also going to be a millimeter. Getting your units right is very important. And then here you have, again, all the channels that we have available thanks to Mew and iRacing. You'll look at the ones that have this little symbol. Those are channels that are just raw data. The ones that have this little paper and pencil, those are calculated maths. So there are some available that are, or actually those are like notes. That's information that's kind of like, that's not data, that's just information that's being exported. So barometric pressure, that's just a number that's not changing with time. Same thing as like the chassis caster, that's also like a new feature that's been added relatively recently. So now you have a lot of setup data that's available to you, which is really cool. It really opens up a lot of opportunities to make like really cool graphs with this stuff. So that's all just raw data. Anyway, so what's our objective right now is suspension front left. And this is how you make your math. So we selected that. You have a bunch of mathematical functions here, or things that aid in your expression. So you have add, subtract, multiply. You can use your keyboard, less than, and or logic statements. You have functions here that you can use, and these are constants in case if you needed to, like you can make a new constant for whatever reason. Let's say if you wanted to do some math and you didn't want to type in raw numbers. Oh, I know why. Because we don't have any constants. A constant has to be made outside. We'll use that later. But anyway, right now what we're looking for is we want to filter this. So we're going to look for a filter, high pass, no, filter, Chevy. Integrated log, minimum, random value, remainder, round, smooth. Yes, so that's what we're looking for. Smoothing of data. So we'll highlight this. All right, sorry. So we'll hit smooth. It gives you the example of what you want. X is your variable, and then your sample points. Smooths X by averaging over a number of points or a time interval. If the second parameter is an integer, it refers to a number of sample points. If it's a real number, it specifies a time interval. Okay, so then we'll insert it in our parentheses, and then we'll put a comma like it suggests, and sample points, let's just say 10. Okay, so we made our first math. Close. What does that do? Let's see. Let's change this, and let's add channel, suspension position filtered, and let's move it up to where it was. And it's just a little bit smoother. And that's all it is. If we did that to all of them, it's just going to smooth it out. There's a quick way of doing it. This is a permanent way, and then it's also going to be helpful because it's going to just not be reset every single time. So here we'll go and change that to the filtered one, and you can see how that changes here, and then it changed it here as well. Like I'm sure this peak wasn't as high before. The center one, it would probably match the front right, but now that's kind of altered the information. So that's something nice to do with your G-force graphs. There is a quick and dirty way of filtering your data to test it, and you can go here, filter, you right click, you can do that to anything. So you can do that and see how it would look and whether or not that's something that you want to do. So the samples, again, let's just try 10. Then I put 11. I guess I did. Oh, why is it doing 11? Whatever. Oh, I guess it doesn't do 10. It just does 11. So you can see what the data looks like. The only problem with doing it the quick and dirty way and not doing it through a math channel is that the next time that you come into Motec is not going to remember that, and you're going to have to redo it all over again. Same thing we can do here. The G plots always look really nice when the data is filtered. And you have to kind of like think about it, I guess, but in the case of G's, you can just rationalize that in reality, all the noise in the data is not really important to you, because if you're there and you're feeling it, I mean, the rate at which the car is moving and shaking, anything that's in the area of just, you know, over 100 hertz is just purely noise. That's not something that's useful. You can only make steering adjustments, and your body can only like process information so fast, and like anything above that, it's kind of like just worthless information. So even then, even with the amount of filtering that I put in it now, like you can still see, I mean, it's reasonable, like small little changes in lateral G here and there, but it's a lot nicer. But same thing with the bumps and everything on the vertical G. Like this is a lot more of what you would feel, not what the accelerometer should be feeling. You could play around with this stuff, you know, and see where you want to be. Filter it some more. See what it looks like at 19. Pretty much about the same. Lateral is the important one. Let's go crazy. So there now you can see this is much more the speed that you should be at. I mean, I just wonder like what frequency we're normally looking at, and if you have that kind of question, well then that's where the FFT comes in. So right now the FFT is reading suspension position, and it is the filtered suspension position, and you can see the frequency that the car is spending most of its time on seems to be around, that seems to be the 0.1 hertz for the position. It's peaking. That's not very fast, but it is very, very filtered. Let's make a new FFT. Like I had the question of what would it look like, or what would be the frequency response of your steering inputs. So let's find out. So let's do an FFT, steering wheel angle. Let's just see what that looks like. 0.1 hertz. 12 degrees per hertz. But you can make inputs as fast as, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, most of the time you're going to be at almost nothing. But you can make inputs as fast as 4, 5, 7 hertz. So obviously you're not really moving your hands that quickly. And what we're looking for is like that's only going to be having a very rare instances. So the maximum seems to be around 7 or so hertz. We can change the way that's displayed. Let's see if this helps any. No, it does not. Cool. But you have the freedom. I mean, you have the math, so you can find out the answers to any kind of questions that you have. This is obviously useless. Don't want it. So the suspension FFTs are cool. Let's look at that and a little bit deeper into it. How do I like to look at it? I like to look at it in the lines. And then I usually actually like to set up 2 of them. So let's duplicate. You can't do that. We'll duplicate the histogram to look at it again. We're going to move this up so that it's next to the other one. We're going to make a new histogram. No, I don't think that's actually right. The suspension histogram is a different one. Suspension histogram, okay? And it's, you know, it's very easy the way that it's set up because it's kind of like already set up for you. But I don't want it tiled. I think I want it, yes, okay, that's what I want. and I also want the lines. Cool. Okay, so I like to have two of them. And the histogram shows you compression and rebound. And what you're looking for is you have the data, the numbers, the averages here. And right now, you know, we have to kind of like take it with a grain of salt because I manipulated the input. The input is the suspension position. And now I filtered them, but they're not all at the same rate. I think this one's at 10. So it's a little bit messed up. So I think that's part of the reason why these two peaks are so off from each other, because the filtering does affect it. You can't look at these numbers in absolute terms. Don't look at them and compare them to somebody else's, because the filtering affects it, and also there are other variables that affect it. So you only can compare it to yourself and your own cars. Don't compare it to other cars. And what I would suggest is that you go out testing, and when you know that you have either a car setup that's perfect, or that you really, really like the way the suspension is handling, you make a note of what your averages are. And you might think that, okay, well, I mean, that's kind of like a good baseline to shoot for. And then whenever you see that they're way off, then maybe you need to make an adjustment to it. But generally what I'm going to be looking for is symmetry in the histogram. Okay, these look very symmetric. I've seen cases where this peak or this nose is all the way over here to the right, where we have too much bump. I've seen cases where it's maybe a little bit too flat and it's not as peaky. The worst case is usually when it's not centered and symmetric, but it's kind of like way off to one side. That's something that's kind of like a red flag and that you should fix. And then these numbers should be relatively close to each other. There is a little bit of a control issue with the car and the suspension if the rear or the front of the car is basically bouncing over bumps a little bit too much. One case is going to be stable over bumps, and one case is going to be an unstable setup. It's going to be easier to lose control of the car when going over bumps. So you definitely want to be mindful of the suspension and what it's doing, and which side is damping more than the other, front to rear. The way that you check the front to rear is by coming over here. So that's why I like to have it both at the same time. I like to have it tiled and overlapping. That way we can see that the front suspension is damping more than the rear. Less damping. If I took off all the damping on the rear right now, it would flatten out those curves a lot. The peakier it is, the more damping there is. So you can see that the front has more damping than the rear tires do. That is the norm for majority of the cars I've seen around here, and the setups that we often download and everything. Keeping them close to each other is also another good thing. So I don't like to see it where there's a huge difference from one to another. Like if all things were equal and I didn't have the filtering completely different for the different cars, suspensions, I would say that this is something that I would want to fix, because you can see that that these are a lot closer to each other, but that the front right is really high, so I don't like that. Cool. So that's the suspension histogram. You can make changes to your damping based on the information that you see here. I don't often look at just the lines in a graph form. I kind of find that useless. It could show you, like if you're driving NASCAR or something like that, you can see if you're bottoming out or if the suspension is going solid. This would give you a suggestion of if that's happening. You would see a sharp, like flat edge to suspension. I don't know that necessarily that this 0 is accurate and whether or not the suspension would bottom out when you hit it, but you could also just see, like in some cases I know that it wasn't, at least in the past, and it would go like negative numbers, but then when it hits and it goes solid, you would be able to see it. Another thing that may be important to you is ride heights. So you can have that. Let's add another group. Ride. I mean, we have a lot of options here. They started putting out more stuff, so that's cool. We have a ride height rear. I don't see a ride height front. That's kind of weird. right height front right. We're gonna add another group. Right height rear left. Right height rear right. Cool. So now you can see our right heights and see what that's doing. Oh, I don't like the way that looks. Let's filter that. Let's also filter that by like 10. There is a point where you can over filter things. That's not also like good. I mean, there is a correct amount, but it does clean up the data a little bit more so you can actually look at it. Okay, so we're not bottoming out anywhere. You can look at your rake. You could look at stuff like that. How would you look at rake? Well, you would make a math channel and you would say add expression. If you want to see the add constant, it would be, let's say gravity, the value 9.81, and the units, it's a unit of acceleration. So we're gonna have to click on that and we're gonna say, I'm looking for meter per second squared. Does anybody see it? Meter per second squared. Okay, so now we have a constant that we added. So then when we make a new expression, it'll be available in case if you wanted to do something Newtonian related, you would be able to do so. But now, okay, so let's say you want to do rake. Well, rake, we want to look at height. Car step stuff, huh? That's nice. Do we have a front height? Maybe it's the center. Maybe it's this one. Okay, so we'll take the center one. Maybe that's why it doesn't say front. Maybe it means center. And then we'll take the rear and subtract those two. And what is this? This is also a distance, length and distance, length and distance. Meters, what are the units? Well, so this is conveniently, Motec lets you know what units you're in already, or the default is at this moment in the properties of the channel. So these both are units that are in millimeters. Well, millimeter minus millimeter is still going to give you a millimeter. So millimeter, millimeter, precision, just one, and we got it. So now let's go ahead and delete this group entirely and delete that group entirely and add a new group, and we're gonna put our rake channel and not available. Why? Because the center, that right height center might not be working then. Let's check if right height center is working. And we'll put both those channels to see if they're working. No, none of them are working. Okay, so then we have to go to our data. Those channels don't work. So then we might have to make our own. Okay, so how to do that? I guess we will just make it manually. So how do we make it manually? We're going to subtract left front, right height front right. Right height front left plus right height front right. Parentheses divided by 2. We're going to average the front right, the front right height. So that's our front right height. And then we're going to subtract it from our rear. So then that's going to be rear left plus rear right. We need parentheses around those. We're going to divide that by 2. And we need a parenthesis around that expression. Separate that. I love using parentheses. They make your math work. Okay, so let's double check. We have a large set of parentheses here. This is the front right height average for the front. So that's front left plus front right divided by 2 minus front rear left plus rear right divided by 2. Okay, so that should work now. Boom. Okay, so now we have our right heights. Our rake, sorry. So let's see if this makes sense. Let's edit this. Remove. Okay, and let's go ahead and edit the math again. And let's put a smoothing filter on this bad boy. We're gonna see it lights up red when it doesn't like what you're doing. Copy. Actually, I should say cut. Cut. Paste. Now it likes it. And then we're going to put a comma and we're going to smooth by 10. Oop, that's too much. What went wrong? Mile? Oh, the units. So the units got all messed up. This should be okay. I don't know how that happened to the units, but okay. So now I filtered it. It looks a lot better. Now let's understand it if maybe I went the wrong way, because I don't know which way you should be subtracting. But okay, so we're going down the straightaway and it's showing negative rake. Let's think about that. The rears are displaying to be at 85 millimeters and the front is showing 77. So that means that the ass of the car is up in the air, and that is the case. So it's negative rake means that the ass is in the air. We go into the brakes, it dives even harder. So that makes sense. I do remember with the Mercedes having a buttload of understeer, and because of that ton of understeer I had to raise the rear roll center and dive the nose, so basically have the ass of the car as high as it'll go, and a bunch of other things to try to loosen it up. So that looks about right. So you can see that it goes positive for a couple moments when the car's bouncing it off of curbs and stuff, but for the most part the nose is always in the down attitude, and at most it seems to be like around 22 millimeters lower than the front. So cool, now we have our rate data. Excellent. All right, so now you know how to use Motec, you know how to analyze your data, you know how to look at your driving technique, now you know how to look at suspension and ride heights. That is cool stuff.